Why is the poop that color?
What's wrong with his skin?
Why is he always sick? I think my baby put something up his nose.
I'm Dr. Wendy Hunter, the pediatrician next door. I'm like that friend you know who's a doctor and then you call them whenever you're worried about your kid because you need practical advice. Parenting is really hard and confusing. You get advice from everyone, just someone at the grocery store, a good friend, and social media certainly doesn't help. I started my career working in an emergency room because I could work at night and I had more flexibility to spend time with my young children. Plus, it was really exciting and I saw a ton of super weird stuff that I will share with you on this show. It was working in the ER where I saw so many parents who were confused and scared about their kids being sick or injured. It's hard to know what to do for your kids when you can't really get a good answer. You can check the internet, you can ask your friends, and honestly, the business of medicine has made it really hard to spend much time with your doctor. So I know from my experience that parents often do leave the doctor's office with more questions, and they're not always quite reassured about their concerns. That's why I don't just answer your questions. I explain how doctors know what they know, and I share the science behind your worries. And that way I can give you really satisfying answers to your questions. There was one pretty straightforward but really memorable case that taught me my style of doctoring. It was probably 2:00 in the morning when this really tough guy kind of dad who had tattoos all over his shaved head came into the ER with his son. He looked really intimidating, except for the worried look on his face. He and his wife brought their son in because he had a fever. The thing is, they had already seen their doctor that day, and he gave them a prescription for Motrin and sent them out the door with the reassurance that everything was just fine, but not with any real explanation about what was going on. So when their son's fever came back and they still didn't understand why he had a fever, the emergency department seemed like a good option to them. Fortunately, the emergency room was quiet that night, and I had time to sit with those parents, and I explained to them the exact chemical processes that go in the body that cause fever and the accompanying symptoms that parents see. After I examined their baby, I explained that the hypothalamus in our brain is like a thermostat, and it regulates our body temperature. When viruses release chemical factors in our body, that changes the set point of that thermostat. And I'll explain this in a later episode, or you can read it now on my blog post. What I learned that night is that what might seem like a really routine childhood symptom to a doctor like me can be really unsettling to a parent. And when I can share some of the knowledge that we have, it's easier for a parent to take care of their child with the confidence that understanding brings. On this podcast, I'll tell you some of the most common scary symptoms in kids that are totally normal, and I'll explain what's going on inside the kid's body and what you can do to help them. We'll explore all the nerdy explanations to your questions, and we'll talk to some experts, like author Dr. Natalie Muth. She's a pediatrician and a registered dietitian. We'll talk to her in episode 1 when she helps answer the question, do kids need vitamins?
Even kids who eat the worst diets or who seem to be extremely picky, most of the time, much of the time, they're still getting enough. We very rarely will see children that have significant malnutrition or vitamin deficiencies.
And I'll talk with my pediatrician friends to share stories you can learn from, like my talk with Dr. Joelle D'Onofrio-Oudman. She's a pediatric emergency medicine doctor. She and I swap stories about the things that scare us as mothers and her as an ER doctor. And we talk about the things that you might think are dangerous for your kids that you don't really need to worry about. And we'll talk about things that scare us that you may not even be thinking about.
There are so many forms of ingestible marijuana that look like candy. And we see kids coming in overdosed on marijuana. A kid overdosed on marijuana looks like they are septic or having a seizure. They look super altered and comatose.
This podcast will explain the latest medical studies to give you the same advantage I have because I have access to the best scientific databases and all the current discoveries. For example, when I was pregnant, I knew I couldn't drink alcohol, but I wondered whether it was okay to have a glass of wine when I was breastfeeding. I searched the internet for an answer and it was completely useless. So I dug into the scientific literature to get the answer to my question. And the answer is that a mom's breast milk has the same alcohol level as in the mom's bloodstream at the moment. So it's perfectly okay to have a glass of wine. When you're pregnant, if you have a blood alcohol content of 0.08, which is the legal limit for driving in most states, so does your baby. Your baby's blood alcohol content actually matches yours when you're pregnant. But if you have a blood alcohol content of 0.08 in your breast milk, it's the equivalent of your baby drinking less than 1/8 of a teaspoon of wine, which really isn't harmful. Look for more of this in a future episode, or you can read the detailed answer on my blog at drwendyhunter.com. And send me your questions on that website. I need your questions for our listener question episodes.
Okay, so I have a doozy for you, Dr. Hunter.
This podcast is a forum for you to share your stories, discover the truth about the headlines, get parenting tips, and know when to worry and when not to. I want to give parents the calm and confidence that knowledge brings, because when you understand why kids do the things they do, you can enjoy parenting more and worry less.
My daughter is sick. Wait, is this going to be on the podcast? Okay, hold on.
New episodes of Pediatrician Next Door will be hitting your feed every week, so be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you listen so you don't miss an episode. For more from the Pediatrician Next Door, find me on the web at pediatriciannextdoorpodcast.com. If you've got a question about the weird things kids do, send an email to hello@pediatriciannextdoorpodcast.com for a chance to hear your voice on the show. I'm Dr. Wendy Hunter, and I'm the Pediatrician Next Door. This show is produced by Red Rock Music. Make sure to subscribe and leave a review wherever it is you're listening. I'll be back next time with more.